Alrighty dighty, everybody. It's Load the Box, and we are joined once again by friend of the show, Dustin Baker of Vikes Now, VikingsTerritory.com. You know him, you love him. He's one of the best. He's our favorite guest by a mile. And we are having him on tonight to talk the NFL draft. We are a little under a month away now from that draft, and before we get going, everybody doing all right? Dustin, you're the guest. We'll let you go first. How you doing?
Oh, wonderful. I haven't talked to you guys in a long time, it feels like, and we had a fantabulous free agency for the Vikings that even astonished me, who thought they'd have a pretty sweet spending spree, but it just exceeded all expectations in terms of building the trenches. So I'm happy to be here to chat with you about that and the draft.
Yes, absolutely. The free agency is crazy because we're going to talk about the draft a lot tonight, and we're going to talk about like offensive line and defensive line, and I'm sure we will bring up Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Will Fries, Ryan Kelly. Like, those guys are obviously marquee players for the Vikings now, but I still think the Vikings could go that direction in the draft, so we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Will, talk to you a little bit more recently than Dustin. We did a show last week together, and we will continue to do those shows together. The regular co-host of Load the Box, Will Goodwin, how have you been?
I have been well. I have been swell, as some may say. Jordan, we uncovered a bit of, shall I say, coincidence before the show that our fathers share a birthday, which is today. So happy birthday, dads.
Insane.
F and Dave, we love you. And Jordan, I hear that there's a story that you wanted to share akin to this momentous day of two birthdays.
Yeah, this is a really dumb story, and no one in the audience is going to care about it. But it's just one of those like weird coincidences that you don't really think would happen. So me and my wife, it was her birthday 2 days ago. Nobody has like a wife birthday on the 29th, do they? Like, let's make sure that we clear that up first. But it was her birthday on the 29th, so we went up to Columbus and camped. About half an hour out of Columbus, and we like tent camped, broke in our tent and maiden voyaged it and all this stuff, and we left the kid with the sitter and had a really good weekend. We went to a Blue Jackets game Friday night, and we met people in the row in front of us, and the guy was like, "I'm from Denver," and we were like, "Well, why are you watching the Blue Jackets if you're from Denver?" And he was like, "Well, I live there now. I'm from Middletown, Ohio. It's this little town, in like the Southwest." And I was like, "Hey, we live in Middletown." And he starts like, he named a restaurant that I can like walk to in less than 5 minutes from my house. Like, it's called The Jug. It's one of those like little, I don't know if you guys have them in Minnesota, but like not The Jug specifically, but like just greasy burger joints where like you don't even get out of your car. Yeah, like it's just one of those types of things. So he's talking about all that, and we're like, "That's crazy that we met." I mean, it's not the craziest thing in the world that we meet someone from Middletown. It's Ohio, whatever. It's only about 2 hours away. His friend that he's there with, his name was Chris, really cool guy. He's talking, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, it's my birthday tomorrow," and my wife is like, "It's my birthday tomorrow," and like it was just kind of crazy. Like like we met these dudes from Middletown, their birthdays lined up, and they were in Columbus for the weekend celebrating a birthday. I was like, I don't know. It was kind of weird. So just a big coincidence for a really good weekend. That'll be my final thoughts. I'll skip my final thoughts tonight for just that fun story. But
And it turns out that this guy named Chris is your wife's long lost twin brother. That's the whole weird twist of the story.
The really
right?
ironic part about this is if you've seen my wife, she looks like if Casper the Friendly Ghost didn't go in the sun for 6 months. Like, she's very pale, and Chris was an African-American gentleman, so pretty opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of skin pigmentation, but it would be pretty funny if that was the case. But all right, well, we're almost 5 minutes in now. Let's dive into some football topics. Dustin, we bring you on. It's almost saddening that the Vikings have J.J. McCarthy and maybe Aaron Rodgers. That's still not completely buried, but we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to get to talk about quarterbacks as much as I think you and I usually like to. I think both of us kind of have a fondness for the quarterback position in the draft process and all that. So, last year I know you were a huge Drake May guy, and you absolutely adored Drake May in the draft process. A couple years ago it was obviously. A couple years ago it was C.J. Stroud, which claps for you for being correct on that one. But I have a question really quickly just to kick it off for the fans of this show that might not watch like Vikes Now and things like that. How do you feel about Shadell Sanders? And do you think if the Giants or the Browns took him in the top 5, it would be like, holy crap, what are they doing? Like, what are your thoughts on him as a prospect? He's just so polarizing.
So I believe that he's going to have to go to the Browns or the Giants, especially the Browns, because it's Kenny Pickett or what else? I mean, what are we doing at this juncture? Drew Lock, who I want to go to the Vikings? No, like you're down to slim pickings, so it's Kenny Pickett or bust, which leads me to believe that the pick's going to be Shadur to Cleveland. If he slides past there, I would hope that he'd go to the Giants because the Giants, was it a week and a half ago, signed Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, and for that time on the calendar, you look at that notification, you're like, oh, sweet, boom, look at those. But when we get to October, we're going to be like, how did they think this was a smart idea, having both of these guys? And then that's it. It's completely mediocre. So I do think Shadur will go off the board in the top 3, if not the top 5. Where I stand on him, he's a part of this quarterback class that isn't as dazzling as last year's. So if I were going to scout him, which I kind of have, I'd kind of put him in that Michael Penix category of how good I think he's going to be. Not like, oh my God, he's a sure thing. There's a couple things that I really like about him. I like that he is a deceptive pocket passer. I, for the life of me, cannot understand how Deion Sanders' son is not a very mobile quarterback. Like, I just assumed at this time last year, like, oh, that guy's got to be like Jayden Daniels, right? You dig into his tape, and he's really not. So I do like the throwback to the pocket pass. I mean, he's certainly not slow, but he is not a take off and run. Like, I mean, it's kind of more like Teddy Bridgewater. When we got him 11 years ago, we're like, sweet, and then he barely would, like, scamper. That's how I perceive Shadur Sanders. I do like the bloodline angle. It seems like these sons of former NFL players usually do turn out better than most or have a reduced bust rate. So when it's all said and done on Shadur Sanders, let's talk 5 years from now, I think he'll be in that tier where we currently plop Kyler Murray or Jared Goff, where we're like, oh, this guy's a good starter. I'm glad he's on our team. I don't think he'll ever get up to the top crust like with Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen, all those guys. It'd be sweet if he did. And I also don't think he sucks. I don't think he's going to flame out like Will Levis has after just 2 years of development. So I know that's kind of a wishy-washy answer that he's not going to be elite, but he's not going to suck. I think he'll be in the middle towards the better part of the middle, kind of like Kyler Murray, although he's not really stylistically similar.
Yeah, I think I... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jordan.
No. You go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, for the sake of his development, would you have a team that you would prefer him to go to? You know, if we're just going to stay between those two, Cleveland or New York.
Oh, man. You would think between both play callers, Kevin Stefanski and Brian Dable, he would be in good hands. Both have stigmas attached to them. I probably trust him with Stefanski a little bit more. If he gets to New York, he's going to have to deal with the immediate bullshit of Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson. He might not get to start right away. I don't know if he has the Sanders gene. That might be a thing that he squawks about. If he goes to Cleveland, we know that if it's Kenny Pickett, it's only going to be Kenny Pickett for a week or two. So skittishly, I'll say the Browns, although that's never a completely desirable destination. I'm glad today the Browns owners came out and said we messed up Deshaun Watson. We've been trying to figure out for 3 years how that happened because Andrew Berry does not seem like the type of guy that would slide into bed with a predator. So I'm glad that the ownership came out and said we screwed that up. And it also makes sense why nobody has been fired. Ownership can't fire themselves, and Andrew Berry seems safe and Kevin Stefanski. So give me Shadur to pair with Stefanski and Jerry Jeudy and whatever running back they end up with.
Do you think that, and this is, I'm gonna go like head first into this conversation now, just because it's interesting. And this is now, we used to have LTB Browns, and it died a terrible death. But like, do you think Jerry Jeudy's gonna be good again without Jameis as the quarterback? Like I don't. He was like third in receiving yards last year, wasn't he? Like he had this like crazy good season last year when he's kind of been mid for his entire career. Like, do you think he's just good now, or is that a fluke?
I think he was always pretty darn good, but with the quarterbacks that slung him the ball in Denver, and then like Deshaun Watson, I swear to God, every Deshaun Watson game, when that game was over, I'd check his box score. It would say 178 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So all we had to cling to was the distant memory of what Deshaun Watson was in 2019 and 2020. And then we got somebody like Jameis who just doesn't give a shit and throws the ball like Nick Mullins. Yeah, he's going to tabulate yards. So I don't know if Judy will, take off with Kenny Pickett, but developing with Shadur or whatever piecemeal patchwork solution they got, if it's not Shadur Sanders, I think that can work. But it all comes down to whether or not Jerry Judy's going to get a volume passer like we thought Deshaun Watson was 5 years ago versus some moron who's only going to get 160 yards and a touchdown per game. I think that makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Okay, we can move off the Browns talk now. I do like, by the way, I cannot tell, and I don't know that the audience will either, and I don't want you to reveal the answer to this. I don't know if he slings the ball like Nick Mullins is a compliment or an insult. It can go either way, I think. And I kind of love that. Nick Mullins, one of my favorite players of all time, because he truly, the definition of a gunslinger. Just all-timer. Okay, let's dive in. Will, I'll let you kick off the questions as we really rake Dustin over the coals and squeeze every last bit of information that we can out of him here tonight. I'll let you kick off the questions here with Dustin.
Fantastic. So, Dustin, like Jordan said, we are going to rake you over the coals. This is an interview for future shows. If you don't do well, you'll get new guests of all the guests that we've had. First and foremost, though, I think, and we were talking about this before the show, the Vikings have 4 draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news about this is that they've filled not every, but almost every hole already in free agency. Some of that banks on some of the young guys to hit that haven't played a whole lot yet. Dwight McGlothern. You're hoping Mekhi Blackman can come back, stay healthy, play well, produce at the cornerback position. If those guys aren't great, the secondary could struggle. Or maybe not great. Great maybe is a little bit too generous. They have to be good. They have to be serviceable. So, all that said, a lot of holes are filled, but there still are some, and you still need depth. Football is a war of attrition. You lose guys, all of that. And the way to stay competitive in this league for long periods of time, and we all know this, is you have to hit on draft picks, something that the Vikings have not really done very well since Kwesi Adofo-Mensah came in 2022. So, that said, Dustin, we've got 4 draft picks. What do you think, and not what you would do, but what do you think, reading the tea leaves, do you think the team is going to do with, let's maybe just start simple, with that first pick, that 24th overall pick in the first round? Are they going to stick and pick? Is there somebody that you think that they're targeting? Or do you think it's going to be Rick Spielman special, trade back, get some added draft capital?
I will say if Jahdae Barron falls or is remaining at pick 24, I would hope or I would think that they'd say, God, we want to trade back, but we can't leave this guy on the board. The problem with Jahdae Barron is there's like 3 cornerback needy teams right in front of the Vikings. Whether or not you perceive the Chargers as one, the Packers one, probably with Jair Alexander leaving. So I don't think Jahdae Barron will be there. Right now, cornerbacks, Byron Murphy, if the season started tomorrow, would start. Probably Isaiah Rodgers, Mekhi Blackman, and they could always sign Shaq Griffin in a pinch and be a spot starter. So that is probably the lone weak spot on the roster. Therefore, in terms of a prediction, I think that Kwesi will trade down from 24 because Barron will not be there. And maybe even trade a second time to really snowball that bitch into another pick in the 3rd or 4th round. And that would plop him maybe in between 34, 39 or so. And the way I keep looking at this consensus big board is even after Travis Hunter, Will Johnson, and Jahdae Barron, there is this fivesome of cornerbacks that lives right in that 30 to 43 range. 5 of them: Benjamin Morrison, Siobhan Revell, Trey Amos, Azare Thomas, and Maxwell Harrison. And I think that is where the Vikings will land. And I don't know which guy it will be. I hope it's Siobhan Revell because to me, he's the most talented. He is this year's Quinion Mitchell. His only malfunction is a torn ACL. And of course, Vikings would draft a guy like that where we'd have to wait and hope that he's ready and then hope the injury recovery goes well. But you would get some good value for Siobhan Revell if that is at pick 36 or something like that. So right now where I'm leaning, although I won't be surprised if they stick and pick and get Walter Nolan or say, you know what, Gray Zabel's going to be our starting left guard because Blake Brandel ain't it. nothing is going to surprise me because we can't predict this. They're truly blessed to take the best player available. But if I was going to put money on it, I would say a trade down and then that one of those corners from that fivesome.
I would put money
You're
that.
pretty. Go
Okay,
ahead, Joel.
I will take this one. I would put money that the Vikings don't take a defensive back with the first selection. I think I've seen what's his name, like Michael Stokes, the Georgia safety. If Kwesi in the most important draft of his life takes another Georgia safety, I think the fan base immediately is like, yeah, fine. Like it's time. Bring Spielman back. We've got the coach. Just get Spielman back in here. We'll take 52 seventh round picks, and we'll hit on 2 or 3 of them, and we'll be fine. Like I think the fan base would. I don't know if the report. It's not really a report, but I don't know if you guys have seen this Asante Samuel scuttlebutt about the nightclub and all this nonsense. I don't know if there's anything to that. But me as the armchair GM, I would sign Asante Samuel Jr. I would go out. They still have plenty of cap space. I would go out. I would get a deal done with Asante Samuel Jr. and I would bring him in. He fits Kwesi's ideal contract perfectly. He's an injury-riddled, talented guy, and if he stays healthy, he's gonna make a huge impact, and he'll look like a genius. And if he doesn't, then it'll be like, we took a chance, and he didn't work out. And to Dustin's point earlier on the show, these guys whose dads played in the NFL are pretty good. So Asante Samuel Jr., guess who his dad is? It's not Jeff Hawthorne. It's Asante Samuel. So I think there's real heat there, and I think the Vikings. I'm choosing to believe that rumor. Dustin, you don't have to speak to that rumor, but what do you think of Samuel Jr. as a prospect free agent? And would you rather see them sign him than go with one of the, those 5 guys that you listed, the Vikings potentially land in the draft?
So on the basis of the rumor, the origin is whack. It is a game of telephone from somebody's neighbor at a nightclub in Miami that maybe heard that he was wearing a Vikings hat. So, and it was on a segment called Reckless Speculation on Score North, which gives you clearance to say whatever you want, no matter how true or false it may be. So the origin of the rumor is suspect, and therefore I'm like, I don't know if that's real. However, the fact that Asante Samuel hasn't signed yet is a smoking gun that he could have a handshake deal. I don't know why he would have that, if he really wants to be with the Vikings, and they're like, homie, you got to wait until after the draft. I guess you could sit there and be patient. I don't know why an athlete would do that. But the only reason I would buy into that rumor or wrote about it on Vikings territory is because it is weird that he hasn't signed yet. So somehow, if some team said, you're going to screw up our compensatory formula, man, but we still want you. If somebody sold him that, great. Hopefully it is the Vikings. The other name I would keep an eye on is Jair Alexander. I would rather have Jair, as much as I don't like him from his Packers days, than Asante, because we know Jair Alexander is good. And I would take either one of these guys rather than the first pick from the Vikings in the draft, because if you sign Asante Samuel or Jair Alexander, then you're good at that spot. You can just go get Amarian Hampton, the 24th pick. You can get Luther Burden. You can get absolutely filthy luxurious if you take care of this cornerback need. So left up to me, I would hope that the Packers release Jair Alexander and the Vikings can swoop him. And then if they can't do that, Asante Samuel can work. But it's really cool, and it's a testament to how this leadership regime has run this team, that we're doing shows 3 weeks for the draft where we're like, I don't really care who they pick because all the roster holes are filled. We like our holes filled,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the Jair one is something where I've been... And I don't know if I've said it publicly on the show, and I don't want to be the guy that's like, I said this 6 months ago. But I do remember telling my wife, after the season, I was listening to Tom Grossi, who, the big Packers YouTuber, and he does general NFL stuff as well. But I was listening to him, and he was talking about how Jair's a cut candidate, and I was like, that's a Vikings move through and through. That is... forget Aaron Rodgers revenge tour. Give me the Jair Alexander revenge tour, because I don't think we need Aaron Rodgers, but we could definitely use Jair. And I think that's a really interesting name, and I'm glad you threw that one out. Will, you also had something to go on with the defensive back discussion.
Yeah, and it's sort of been answered in the banter here, so I don't need to re-ask it. What I was really going to ask is just kind of just not even an ask, but just like a reclarification or a doubling down on the fact that defensive back is what you want, Dustin, right in the first round or maybe the first pick here. I think maybe something that I would ask, just based on the idea of Asante Samuel or Jair Alexander coming in as a benefit over a rookie. Obviously, that helps you in the short term. That helps you in 2025, maybe 2026. It helps your defense immediately. Those guys can play. We know they can play. But something that I've been talking about on the show is the cornerback position to me is one that, a la Xavier Rhodes, they can fall off that cliff real quick. And so having young, explosive talent is, in my mind, paramount because you want to be able to have young, athletic corners that can give you 5-6 years. Whereas with these other guys, Jair, Asante Samuel, Jair could be bad next year. And there's a real precedent for that. Guys that reach the upper 20s, early 30s, they can just fall off that proverbial cliff. And so I'm curious what you think about that sort of as like a long-term team building proposition of drafting a guy who you are pretty confident in is going to be really good versus going and getting a guy who already is really good.
I would like to jump
Yeah.
in super quick and say I see your Xavier Rhodes and I raise you Russell Douglas and Mike Hilton. Like just two old corners that played well, like pretty into their 30s and were still pretty solid. I just wanted to throw those two. Those are also two free agents that are still on the market if the Vikings want to get crazy and just go all in on the old man secondary again. But Dustin, I'll let you respond now.
So let's see. Yes, if I were running the team and I had my team of scouts and they said, you know what, Siobhan Ravel is the real deal, I would be elated that he is our guy. However, I am jaded because the Vikings have not been able to figure out drafting cornerbacks in back-to-back regimes. And I mean, last year wasn't their fault because of Kyrie Jackson. But I guess I'm just kind of paranoid. I too don't want the Vikings to draft a safety. I'm content with Theo Jackson, content with Josh Metellus. We'll figure out the life after Harrison Smith when we get there. So yes, in a vacuum, if Howie Roseman was drafting the cornerback, I'd say, yeah, let's do it. But I'm nervous that we just can't figure this damn thing out, and therefore free agency is a more bona fide solution. Ultimately, in terms of my preference, if Kenneth Grant is available, he's probably my holy grail pick. Because we have we have Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave there, and that's fantastic. I thought I would have done cartwheels if it was one of those guys, and then that was it because we have Jalen Redmond. But now they got Rich at this spot. So selfishly, I want the team to emulate, to replicate the Eagles, and just get really, really affluent in the trenches. My only problem with when the Vikings draft the defensive tackle, fans are not going to have the patience for that guy. We bitched and bitched and bitched about Dallas Turner not getting enough snaps last year because these Pro Bowl edge rushers we got, we can't take them off the field. So therefore, Dallas Turner just can't play. Well, that's going to happen again this year if they draft Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon. Is you have Harrison Phillips, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, Jalen Redmond played like a baller last year. The defensive tackle that they're going to draft, if they do that, he's not going to play right away. So I'm going to have to listen to folks bellyache about, well, crazy special. Looks like Kenneth Grant's not playing until 2026. Yeah, that's how it works sometimes. It's like the Nolan for the Eagles. He didn't break out until this year because they have too much depth.
Yeah.
So I think my preferred pick is trench fortification, whether that's a Gray Zabel, Derek Harmon. But there's really not a draft pick outside of something really stupid, like, hey, Quinn Ewers at 24. There's not anything from this draft where I'm going to be like, oh my God, they screwed this up. Because it's all gravy right now, if you think about it. Even Colston Loveland. It took me 3 months worth of the draft process to put together that's J.J. McCarthy's tight end from college. And God, if he was there, if the Broncos pass him up, that would be fun. Those are the luxuries you have right now when your team has all of the roster holes filled, is you can daydream about a tight end fall, and you can daydream about Amarian Hampton. And it's a really, really cool spot to be in as a fan and a writer about the team.
I love when Dustin comes on because we get to go from being like a pretty PG-13 show to being like Well, PG-13.
All holes filled, yeah.
Like all holes filled. We're saying bitch all the time. Like, so I'm going to bitch and bellyache if Loveland is there at 24 and the Vikings trade back. And don't get like ridiculous, like, oh, okay, we scammed this team. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like an obvious one-sided trade. I'm gonna be upset. I want Cole. Loveland's, I think, my favorite prospect in this draft. I just love him, and I have had again, this is a Dustin show. I've had a hard on for the 2 tight end set since the Patriots with Gronk and Hernandez. I just think it's the best way to play football because you're so unpredictable all the time if you have tight ends that can block and pass catch. So, like, I think it frees up, and this is crazy because I love TJ Hawkinson. I bought his jersey. I love the guy. It makes him now a valuable trade piece if you do want to look at, like, you know, he's coming off a knee injury. We got a couple years out of him, and he can't block that well, and there was probably a reason why Detroit was getting rid of him, and we got Loveland now. He's cheap. Let's trade him, get a pick back. You know what I mean? Like, it just makes it gives you a lot of flexibility at that position. And I get tight end's not a crazy position, but if the goal is J.J. McCarthy 15 years, J.J. McCarthy, if he is the guy, is getting what's the number? Probably going to be like $65 million when he gets paid. So,
yeah.
And I know the cap will go up. I think the cheat code for that, get an elite tight end that you can pay $20 million, and he's the happiest man on the planet because holy shit, I'm the richest tight end in the universe at $20 million a season. Like the Chiefs having Kelsey, and I know Kelsey's a different level of tight end, but having a receiving tight end that's that good is a cheat code salary cap wise because you now just are paying a really good wide receiver nothing in terms of like the market. I mean, you know, would you rather have prime Travis Kelce at what he makes, or would you rather have Jamar Chase at $50 million a year? It's that whole cap manipulation nonsense. So Loveland to me is a woo-wee. I didn't expect to talk about him this much, but I love that prospect. Will, I want to continue with you.
I mean, dare I say you could even get cute and have 3 tight end sets once in a while. You could have you could put both Hawkins, or you could put Hawkinson in the slot if you're worried about who your wide receiver 3 is for that week or whatever, whether or not Jalen Naylor's producing, or if they get somebody in the draft or whatever, or if Jordan Addison's suspended. You could end up using TJ Hawkinson in the slot a little bit more, and then you got 2 other tight ends that can play on the ends. You know, that could be something fun to play with. So I don't hate the idea of Colston Loveland whatsoever.
And they only have 2 tight ends on this roster. Usually at this juncture, they have at least 3, probably 4. So just a little evidence there that maybe they will get one.
I love what Will's saying about, and there's an avenue to be explored about, like, well, Hawkinson's already been paid. Why don't we look at trading Jordan Addison next season? You know what I mean? Like, he's going to want a contract and he's going to be worth something. So why don't we? I think it creates so much flexibility. And I mean, you threw out the name Luther Bowden, which I thought was if they go wide receiver, I'll be shocked, but I won't be appalled if that makes sense. Like I'd be like, oh damn, like like they are really getting rich at the skill positions, which I would be a little upset because, like I said, Loveland, if he's available, and you've thrown out a lot of guys in the trenches, I would love to throw a name at you really quick, defensive line wise. And maybe this is I've just spent a weekend in Columbus homoism coming out. Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, 6'3", 330 pounds, monster athlete, made like the whatever it's called, like the freak list, like, you know, where like this guy ranks like 100 just physical specimens in college football. And this dude's just a monster, but he's pretty gifted. He fell down running the 40-yard dash. It was kind of like this viral moment where it was like, haha, big fat guy fell down trying to run fast, LOL. But I think nose tackle wise, I would love to see Tyleik Williams brought in here, and I think he would have a chance to get some cyclical playing time, because I think right now I don't know that the Vikings have a nose like Jonathan Allen. I guess would be like the nose. I don't know who the nose is. Like,
Harrison Phillips.
Yeah, but he doesn't seem like a true.
No, he's
like,
not.
No, yeah, right. Like, and so I feel like just getting this giant wall of meat that is also pretty physically gifted would be something special for the Vikings. So I wanted to get your opinion on him, especially because he does look like he's going to be a late 1, early 2 type of guy. So I think he fits with a trade down and then select him late in the first. So what do you think of Tyreek Williams?
His draft stock has actually tumbled a little bit. I remember in January when I started scouting the defensive tackles, he was up in the 20s, and now he's kind of even down into the 37, 38, 40 range for some mock drafts. So the reason that I haven't connected him to the Vikings in mock drafts or in shows like this is because Brian Flores never employs a nose tackle. Like, we're just content with Harrison Phillips, and we call him a nose tackle. It's kind of like Mike Zimmer towards the end with just Shamar Stevens saying, oh, no, it's fine. He's a nose tackle. No, he's not. Linval Joseph was a nose tackle. So I will believe it when I see it that the Vikings invest in a nose tackle, because why haven't they done it? There's always big nose tackles on the free agent market that the Vikings could have signed anytime in the last 2 years if they needed one. But they've just kind of said, no, Harrison Phillips is a good run stuffer, and that's what our nose tackle does. But if they decided to change course or philosophies and said, you know what, we are going to draft Tyreek Williams, I would love it, because it would show that we can stuff the run a little bit more. And in fact, the Vikings were fabulous at run defense last year. You would think it'd get even better. Kenneth Grant is also a big body dude, and he will go in the first round. So I'm guessing that he is more likely, like, let's say they agree with us and they're like, we finally need a nose tackle. Kenneth Grant is probably more likely. His scouting report, there's more upside than Tyreek, but if they do trade back and end up in that 35 to 45 range, yeah, sign me up for Tyreek Williams. I was really excited about him back in January when it felt like, hey, this guy could be somebody that's available to the Vikings. He's tumbled a little bit, and then, of course, the Vikings got too greedy in free agency, and we don't have urgent need at these spots anymore.
I pounded the table for Kenneth Grant early in the draft process. He was what I just did for Colson Loveland, I did that for Kenneth Grant a few weeks ago. I was like, if he's there, you have to take him. I think he's really, really good, blah, 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 whatever. My fear is I think he's going to go like top 16, and I just don't think the Vikings are going to have a chance to get to him. But Will, I want to give you a chance to add in here.
Well, it just seems, Jordan, like you're trying to recreate the Michigan Wolverines. So do you want to get Jim Harbaugh over here too? Should we just let O'Connell walk and trade him?
Just do the trade. Yep, do the trade. No, I think that there's something to the fact that the Vikings. I don't know if I think the team says and the team's actions say we want to play really good defense and we want to run the ball better. And that Michigan team was the best damn running offense I've seen. It was like LSU with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all them. That was like, holy cow, I've never seen a passing offense like this in college football. That's the best. And then you watch Michigan just hand the ball off a million times and just demolish teams defensively. Like they weren't like an all-time great college football team. I mean, they were really good. They went undefeated or whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, I think Michigan stocked up a bunch of NFL talent that played a very Jim Harbaugh smash mouth style of football, and the Vikings are going that direction, so why not select from that pool if that's the style of football you want to play? I mean, I think even though it's different sides of the ball, are Jordan Mason and Kenneth Grant not like the same kind of player? You know what I mean? Like they're both just like mean, fall forward, fight for every yard. You know, like they both give off the same energy, and the Vikings have very clearly seen like a shift there. Dustin, staying on the defensive line, what do you think of TJ Sanders out of South Carolina? He's more of the smaller defensive end, or defensive tackle, whatever you want to call it, depending on scheme. I personally like him as like a pass rushing guy, but I worry that with Hargrave and Allen coming in, he's not even on the board. What do you think of him?
Well, he's round 2 or round 3 guy right now.
Yeah, I think he's like round 2. Yeah, he's like he might. I've seen a mock where he goes like 32, but like he's usually like mid 2.
Yeah, so I do like him, and I do like those defensive tackles that are kind of in that borderline territory, because I think that's where we're headed with these trade backs that I'm proposing, or at least predicting. I would, because of this anti-nose tackle thing the Vikings had, I have just settled on the idea that if they do improve at defensive tackle, it's going to be a 3-tech guy like Walter Nolan. So Yeah, sign me up. I don't really, for the sake of this draft, it doesn't matter to me that Sanders wouldn't play right away because I don't even think Kenneth Grant would play week 1.
Yeah.
So if this is what they prioritize, you'll recall, I think it was at the Combine, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said, we got to be able to rush the quarterback with 4 players. First time he said any shit like that, which was evidence that they're going to improve the front 4. Bada bing, that's what they did with Hargrave and Allen. So if they want to keep doing that a la the Eagles, then yes, certainly get a guy like Sander. All these guys that we've talked to, I don't really have any of them that I'm like, ooh, that guy's a turd. All these defensive tackle dudes. But I will say this: it probably for the second time this show and the 100th time leading up to week 1, defensive tackles notoriously take a little bit longer to develop than these other spots. I don't know if it's because they get buried on the depth chart or they just it takes a little bit longer. They don't typically come in and have that like immediate edge rusher like Jared Verse. So you felt his impact right away. The guy was 24 years old. Defensive tackles aren't usually like that. You need to give them an extra year. So I will caution anybody that watches this show or any Vikings fan, if they draft a defensive tackle, you're probably not going to see him as a starter until 2026, maybe 2027. But again, that is where we're at with team building is you can stockpile young guys in this draft and have them sit and be ready and then contribute like Dallas Turner last year, that when he got on the field, good shit always happened.
Will, does that bother you? Like, because I want to get your opinion as like, I don't want to say you're not like the draft guy, but you're more of like the strategic guy. You're less of like the let's watch tape on prospects type of guy. So like, does the idea of taking a guy in 2025's draft that isn't going to start for the team until maybe next season, maybe 2 seasons from now, does that bother you? If he starts at some point and is good, who cares when it is? You know what I mean?
It doesn't bother me at all. I think 2 things are true of me. One, I am inherently patient. So it's sort of required to be a sane Minnesota sports fan. I feel like you have to be patient, otherwise you will drive yourself crazy. So that's point 1. I think the other point is that I also am of the mindset that I think the Vikings are going to be good this year, but I don't think this is a Super Bowl season because you basically have a rookie quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether or not you pick a guy in the first round, early second round, whatever, no matter how good he's going to be, I think it's totally okay to give him a gap year, to give him a redshirt year.
Yeah.
Yeah, give him a few snaps like Dallas Turner got, but this season, in my mind, the team's never going to say this, just like last season. They didn't say this. They didn't believe in this idea of a gap year. I mean, they went out and won 14 games. But I think it is more than okay if they're going to let this season be a development year for a lot of these guys. Let J.J. McCarthy get familiar with running an NFL team. And then in the same breath, let's get this stud defensive tackle ready for 2026 when he can hit the ground running at, still 24 years of age or whatever he's going to be, and, contribute to a season that really has more of the makings of a Super Bowl contender type season. So that's my opinion.
Think of it this way, based on the way that everything has happened in free agency, the only guys that could be drafted probably at 24, maybe after one trade down, that would start week 1 to me would be Gray Zabel at Blake Randall's spot if he just had a fantastic summer. Tyler Booker, he had kind of a shitty RAS score, but if they draft him, he'd probably audition. And then maybe like Maxwell Hairston at the end of round 1, early round 2, could win a job over Isaiah Rodgers. But any of these guys in the trenches, especially defensive tackle, I guess it'd be fantastic if they drafted Walter Nolan and that guy just beat out Javon Hargrave this summer. We'd be like, all right, I guess what a waste of money on Hargrave. But the whole draft should be focused on what is the team going to look like in 2 or 3 seasons when we hope they're a bona fide Super Bowl contender like the Bills year after year. We know they're going to be there. Because right now, the way I look at it, Gray Zabel is the only one that stands off the page to me that's like, I bet you he will start if he gets drafted.
So that's actually the next part of where we're going is guards, and let's change up how we do it. Instead of me throwing names at you've brought up Gray Zabel a lot. He's technically a tackle right now, isn't he? But
he plays every single spot.
Yeah, he's like a swing. He's one of those swing guys. So even worst case scenario, like let's say he comes in and you're like, I don't know that I want this guy to stout on my offensive line this season. He's a swing backup that I think is going to immediately be not effective, but the odds that all 5 linemen stout all 17 games for the Vikings this season are pretty low. So he would get some playing time. So is he your favorite interior offensive line prospect or just offensive line prospect that you could see the Vikings going after? And is this just because, he went to NDSU, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I don't really give a shit that he went to NDSU. I guess it's kind of cool in the grand scheme of things. But so offensive tackle, we don't have those on the board. I don't think that would be a head scratcher if they draft an offensive tackle at 24 like Calvin Banks fell. That would be one thing. We'd be like, really? I guess that means O'Neill's expendable or something like that. So we'll wipe all offensive linemen that don't play the interior off the board. I am scared by Tyler Booker's RAS score. It's not good. It's like in the 3s, and it's like, that's really, really strange. Now, those things aren't absolute gospel. But if the Vikings are going to spend their first-round pick on somebody, why don't we just get a guy who has an RAS score that isn't shit? So Gray Zabel's, conversely, is quite good. I think his is in the 9s. And the reason that I like him is Donovan Jackson is the other guy. I think that's J.J. McCarthy's high school teammate or something. He's gettable later. I think Donovan Jackson ultimately goes to the Chiefs with the 31st pick.
Yeah.
But through a process of elimination, that leaves me with Gray Zabel with the perk of the Midwestern connection with him. After him, then you're waiting until round 3. Like Tate Ratledge has a fantastic RAS score. He's from Georgia. And then I guess the fascination on Zabel is I don't know how he would be so how is he the one guy that is so versatile in an offensive line? I always wonder, how is it in all of these years in NFL history, there's not a single specialist who kicks and does punts? Like, why can't there be one human being who's been bred to do that? So if they have cracked the code on Gray Zabel, where you're like, hey, Christian Darrisaw, he sprained his ankle, he's out 2 weeks. Hey, throw Gray over there, he can do it. Oh, Ryan Kelly, looks like he's got a concussion, he's going to miss 2 weeks. We'll throw Gray Zabel in, he could play that. Like, it's really cool that guy would have that. Now, I did a podcast with Brian McKinney for about 4 years, and he hated offensive line versatility. He wanted the one guy to stay in his spot. The idea of Bryant McKinney moving over to guard actually made him laugh. So he's like, I hate it when guys get moved around. Maybe that's an old school thing. But I do like Zabel through the process of elimination. And if you look at it, Blake Brando probably will be the starter. But if they want to continue this tour of getting rich at every darn spot that there is, give me Zabel at left guard and let's really run this thing.
Bryant McKinney hates the idea of being kicked into guard because of the disparaging... That's not a word. Because of the disparity, is that a word? We're going to go with it, in pay between stouting tackle money and stouting guard money. Absolutely. I think that's every tackle's nightmare is who was the guy for the Eagles this past year who came from, I think, the Jets, and they traded for him, and they were like, we know you've played tackle. What'd you say, Will?
Becton.
Thank you. Yes, Mekhi Becton, it's like, I'm a tackle. And the Eagles said, no, you're not. You're a giant guard. And you're not going to make any money for the rest of your life. You're going to be dope, pal. We're going to give you $3 and a ham sandwich, and you're going to be in the bloodlines because you have to play stouting NFL guard instead of right tackle or left tackle. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's millions of dollars no matter what. But, I think if you're Donovan Jackson and you've traditionally been an inside lineman, last year, Ohio State kicks you out to tackle due to injuries, whatever. You're hoping, your agent is hoping, your mother is hoping, you get drafted by the Chiefs and they make you a stouting tackle in the NFL. And if you do well, you're going to get the big payday. Versus if you're a guard, you can see that you know what I mean? So I'm sure that's where a lot of it comes from is like, no, I don't play guard. I don't do that. I don't get paid enough I get paid too much to do that. So I think that's some of what it goes. Donovan Jackson's one of my favorite guys in this draft. A guy who it just seems like the Vikings would take is this like Marcus Imbo, whatever his name is, from Purdue, like kind of an undersized guy or whatever. Like that just seems like the Vikings are like, we're going to get big and beefy and we're going to run the ball inside the 5 and we're going to be so good. And we're going to draft an undersized guard who's really good in the zone run scheme and can't pass protect for shit. And, like, here you go, guys. Like, here's Garrett Bradbury. Just moved over one spot. Like, and it just seems like it would be a very Vikings move to... not quite abandon that zone run scheme, not quite get away from the smaller athletic linemen that I've been screaming to get rid of for the last 3-4 years. Yeah, Will, what do you think of taking a Goud? I know a lot of people think Gouds in the first round is he'll say it's terrible, it's blasphemous. Is it just like if he can play, he can play?
I don't care if you take him first overall. If he can play, he can play.
Hell yeah.
If the Vikings have a need and you draft a guy who's going to be as good as Trey Smith, you go get the guy. I don't think too hard. I mean, obviously, I have not done the draft research on value of picks and all that the people running teams have done. But I think the idea of the team has a need, there's a guy there that you want, you go get him. Obviously, back to our beginning conversation, if you can take a calculated risk and you can trade back and you can recoup picks and still get that guy, then you do that. But to me, I don't worry so much about, what the optics are, because the truth of the matter is the Vikings need a left guard. And, there's scuttlebutt about whether or not it's going to be Walter Rouse or, could be somebody in-house. I don't think, let me put it this way. I think we're kidding ourselves if we think Blake Brandel is long for this team on a starting caliber. I think he's a good swing player. I think he is a great fill-in-the-holes guy. I think he is the perfect sort of, fourth outfielder, to use a baseball term, just to have on your roster ready to step in when somebody sprains an ankle. I don't want him starting 17 games. And so if you can go get a guy who can do that for you, then you do that thing. Also, just a quick note before I let you guys butt in. For those who might not be aware, Dustin was referencing the RAS score. That's the relative athletic score. It kind of takes into account body metrics, 40-yard dash, different combine drills, and puts it into a score that's between the scale of 0 and 10. So he was referencing scores of 3 versus scores of 9. Obviously, 9 is better in this scenario. So just a little calculus there for listeners who might not know what RAS score means. But that's my take on the guard in the first round thing.
One other thing on guards, let's say this Gray Zabel thing doesn't pan out and he just isn't in the Vikings' plans. When this free agent, limbo or hiatus is lifted after the draft, when they can sign people pain-free without screwing up the compensatory formula, Brandon Scherf is still out there, and he was on the Commanders when Kevin O'Connell was the offensive coordinator, and we saw through the Jonathan Allen signing that evidently mattered. They knew each other. So that one would be one to keep in mind for, probably early May. And then also Will Hernandez is a decent guard, probably a slight upgrade on Blake Brandel. He hasn't signed anywhere. And I think as soon as like the Sunday after the draft, Vikings can sign any free agent and don't have to worry about screwing up the precious compensatory formula.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was actually looking today, just kind of reading like about some of the remaining free agents and stuff, and I was like, Brandon Scherf is still. I mean, I get that like he's an old guy at this point, so like, yeah. What would scare me about that, and I don't know that this would scare the Vikings off, but I think he could come and make an impact this year. I don't know that I would trust him to be your starting guy next season, but if the plan is we'll get Scherf, we'll take a mid to late round flyer on a guy, and if that mid to late round guy doesn't seem like he's it, then we can address it. We'll kick the can down the road almost to see who's going to stout at that position. And worst case, if Kelly and Fries pan out, then 80% of the offensive line is really good. We'll just have to put in an okay to slightly not okay left guard, and hopefully, the rest of the line will compensate for that, and, we'll be able to scheme around the weak point, if you will. We've been going for
and Dalton Reisner's always out there, too.
Dalton Reisner is always out there. It'll be week 6, and there will be fans that will be like, the Vikings should bring Dalton Reisner back, all right? Like, he was rock solid for them the last 2 years, and I don't know why. And then he'll get here and he'll be like, I always wanted to be a Viking, and it's like, what do you mean? Like, I don't know. That Dalton Reisner is he's a weird dude. Like, why does he wait so long to sign? Does he just hate like April, May mini camps? Is that does he just hate those things? Or, I don't know. Dustin, I want to get this off of you. And this is not final thoughts, but it's similar to final thoughts where it's a soapbox for you. Do you have a guy in this draft? Doesn't have to be a first rounder. Doesn't have to be a seventh rounder. Just anyone in this draft, a crush. Hey, this guy, people aren't seeing it. He doesn't even have to be a perfect fit for the Vikings. Just this is a guy that I think is a baller and is gonna be pretty solid in the NFL. Why is I'd be elated if the Vikings ended up. Do you have a guy like that you've developed a crush on?
Yeah, it's probably not applicable to the Vikings, and I'll explain why. So Jordan Mason came along via trade and killed all of our luscious dreams about drafting a running back and having that guy on the team for 4 or 5 years. Believe it or not, my selfish prick instinct when I saw the Jordan Mason trade, the first 10 seconds was like, damn it, now we're not going to draft a running back. And then I warmed up to it thinking, well, we don't need to. They can still get one in later rounds. So that's a long setup that when I was watching all of these running backs extensively to see what they do well, to see what activates my eye test. And I really loved what DJ Giddens did from Kansas State, but it doesn't look like he really pass blocks. And I'm pretty sure that the Vikings have a litmus test that says, Ty Chandler, if you can't pass block, we don't need you. We're going to trade for Cam Akers, my man. So, but when I watched the running ability and from a fantasy football perspective, which is half the reason I was looking at running backs, is DJ Giddens. I think if he gets to a team that really doesn't care if he is an elite pass blocker, that guy for his draft stock, which is round 3, round 4, round 5, if he falls, I think he's got the moves, the juice to do it. So give me him at running back. And then, let's see, probably going back to the Kenneth Grant recommendation. I don't think he's going to be bad in the NFL. And sometimes when you get down to brass tacks, scouting in a draft, you just want to find the guy who isn't going to suck, who isn't going to be a bust. And then therefore you're going to find somebody who's good. And then at wide receiver, I haven't spent a lot of time, but the dude that they had the top 30 visit with Monterey Baldwin, he looks like he would be fun as a gadget guy from the later rounds. I can't remember if it was you, Jordan, or Will. Somebody on the show said that you wouldn't absolutely hate drafting another wide receiver. I think that would be really fun because it would just show how they just want to slap you in the face with offense. If we're chilling April 24th, pick number 24, they don't trade back, and all of a sudden they're like, Vikings select Matthew Golden. I'll be like, wow. And then we'll start to daydream about how explosive they can be. So those are some of the dudes that I've looked at, especially Giddens, and said that guy, if he gets touches, is going to be good.
What do you think of Scatterbo? Like, I love this write-up that I saw on him the other day. It was like, every few years a running back comes along that's all the metrics say he sucks, but he's really good. I was like, I think we all watched him in the playoff single-handedly keep Arizona State in that game against Texas. And it was pretty magical. Like, that just watching him, throwing up on the sideline, throwing touchdown passes and catching 50-yard bombs. Like, what do you think of Scatterbo? Do you think he has a future in the NFL? I'd be elated if the Vikings took him. I don't care if he'd get snaps or not.
I think he has a future. It'll start off as RB2, RB3. On my show, Josh Fry, who's probably our best draft mind at Vikings territory, every time before the Jordan Mason trade, I'd say, what are they going to do at running back? He kept saying, I'm telling you, he's going to be good. So that made me warm up to him. One of my dirty little secrets, which is unfair, is white running backs and white wide receivers. I usually see them and cringe because I'm just like, I don't know, that guy, I don't know if he's in the right spot here. When I was in college and play Mad with my friends and we'd have franchise mode, we'd go through our draft, and at that time it would have been like, hey, 2028. And if the running back we drafted was white, we would just get rid of him because we're like, we can't have a white running back. So that is my selfish, stupid soapbox. I don't really do a whole lot with white running backs, but Mike Allstott did it pretty well. Peyton Hillis did it for a year or two.
Peyton Hillis was a Madden cover athlete, and you will put respect
Wasn't that
on
a rigged
his name.
vote process?
No, it was not. It had nothing to do with anything. He was a good running back for one season. But Mike Allstott was really good for, back in the 90s.
Yeah, I think Scatterbo will find a role on a team. I don't know if it's going to be 25 touches or carries per game.
Maybe this is because I'm from more of the South than you guys, but my draft crush that I will throw the name out here. It's Jack Beck. He is the
Yeah.
white wide receiver from TCU, and I mean, golly, he just looks like a dental insurance salesman. You know, like he just seems like the Adam Thielen story, but like you actually draft him. He legitimately, and this is probably racist of me to say, he reminds me of Lad McConkey from JoJo, where it's like, yeah, he's probably just going to come in and be a slot wide receiver, and he's going to win over the middle. Oh, he's going to run a little like you know what I mean? Like he's just kind of like more technical than speedy. And you know what are all of the things that they would say about Thielen? Like, you know, he's a grinder. You know, he's sneaky fast. Like, you know, all those things that, you know, you say about the white wide receivers or whatever. But I like Jack Beck. I think he's going to go a little too high because he's looking like a late second, early third type of guy. I don't think the Vikings are going to spend that kind of capital on the wide receiver position. But like you said, I'm not going to be mad if they do. I think it would be interesting. Will, do you have? It might not be a specific prospect. If it is, that's awesome. But do you have like a position you want to see, like in your out of house, the Vikings go with?
Yeah, I sort of buried, or not buried. I showed my hand. For me, it's guard. I just think you can't have too many offensive linemen. And now, in the Vikings' very brief history of drafting guards since Kwesi showed up, hasn't been great. Obviously, Ed Ingram, you know, being case in point, but also it's to your point earlier, Jordan. These guys are not going to last 17 games. Guys get injured all the time on the offensive line. The Vikings have seen it plenty. I want to see more shots at that dartboard. You know, I just think it's getting far too important of a position. It's not as sexy as tackle. It's not going to get paid as much as tackles do. But with defenses prioritizing interior pass rush more and more, offenses need to prioritize who's going to stop those guys. And yes, if you have 4 strong offensive linemen, you can sort of hide Blake Brandel, but I always think about the Lions sort of as this beacon for how to build an offensive line, and why the Lions became so good at running the ball and protecting Jared Goff is they drafted all those guys, and they were all high draft picks. And so you build a group that is elite by spending draft capital on it. It's not a sexy pick. It's not super exciting. The fan base isn't going to go crazy if you see a, you know, high 20s, low 30s draft pick on an offensive guard. But it's what this team really, they need to, I mean, they are buying into it, but they need to keep buying into this idea of beefing up middle. And I still do worry about having one weak link there. Not that a rookie's going to come in and immediately be nails, but I think if you're thinking about 2026, 2027, 2028, those years being the golden years of opportunity, you still have to start thinking about that now, and you can't rely on a guy like Blake Brandel or hoping that Walter Rouse moves to guard, you know, from tackle to be your solution there.
You know, that's a really good take. That's a really old school football take in honor of our father's birthdays. Like, I think they would love that take. But screw that. Trade next year's first and second round picks. Move up. Get Ashton Genty. Let's cook. Let's go crazy. Let's go absolutely nuts. I know I said my final thoughts were over. I have to brag on myself a little bit. I've been reading again. Trying to, you know, stop melting my brain with TikTok. Went up to Columbus. They have like this really cool bookstore up in Columbus that me and Delaney went to, reading Zodiac, which my green screen thing is going to kind of mess up, but it's a best-selling book about the Zodiac killer, and it's about the guy who was like they made a movie about it with Jake Gyllenhaal and Al DJ and all that. If it's a really good movie if you get the chance to see it, but reading through that, it's pretty good so far. I mean, it's all true stuff, so it's kind of eerie how it's like a mystery novel that you're reading, and then you kind of remind yourself in the moment, like, these are real people that died and never got to, like, you know, their families never got to see each other. So it's pretty neat. It's a pretty good book. Just wanted to throw that out there. Again, Dustin, I'll pass it off to you, and then Will, you can close out the show. Those will be my brief final thoughts. Follow the show at LTB Vikings. Subscribe to the YouTube. Do all the stuff. we love you guys. You know what to do. Dustin, soapbox, final thoughts. Doesn't have to be football. Doesn't have to be Vikings. Can be. We can talk LeBron for a minute if you'd like to, but it is up in the air for you. And also make sure to plug all your socials, all that kind of stuff. You know, be the corporate shill that you are bound to be.
VikingsTerritory.com is where I write. On Twitter, it's at Dust Baker. That's random thoughts, and then the video is Vikes Now on YouTube. I guess my final Vikings thought was I fully expect the team to trade back. Every time I try to reel myself back in and say, no, look how great it went when they drafted Jordan Addison, when they stuck and picked. I just think it's too I'm pretty sure that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah knew the second he pressed the green button with the Jacksonville Jaguars to get the draft pick that got Dallas Turner. He probably said to himself as a former trader, like, I can get that shit back. Watch me do it. And I'm pretty sure that's what he's going to do. So while I would love Jahdae Barron at 24 or Kenneth Grant, who gets like his fourth reference on the show tonight, I'm more realistically thinking they slide down the board after a trade or two, and therefore you're in that mix where Siobhan Revell is there. Maybe Derek Harmon slides a little bit. But I will not be mad one bit if they go get Gray Zabel, if they go get a defensive tackle. To get fortification via youth in the trenches, or the speech that Will just gave, that you're going to need this guy in 2 years if you don't think you're going to use him right away. Nobody cares. Eventually he'll get some playing time.
Absolutely.
So I think we'll get back to Trader Kwesi. In terms of when we get done that Saturday night, the 26th, I bet you we're like, well, look at them. They ended up getting seven dudes came out of this draft after all. That's what I got.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. I love that. I think that wraps it up well, because that's where we started this show tonight. So Dustin, thank you. Thank you for coming on, giving us an hour of your time. I'm going to finish this with a weird sort of final thoughts. Just going to be bold and audacious here. Vikings beat writer Alec Lewis writes for The Athletic. He's fantastic. He started a podcast last season. It's going well. And one of the things that I just picked up from him when he started the podcast, it was just an independent, venture, doing it on his own, podcasting out of his basement, kind of like we are. And obviously he has more cachet. He's got more followers. He's got The Athletic subscribers, knocking on his door, waiting for him to upload his next podcast. But one of the things he did is he just shamelessly plugged and said, if anybody runs a business and wants to sponsor my show, give me a call. And lo and behold, he got a sponsor. So I'm going to do the same thing here. We lost our last sponsor. And so I'm going to shamelessly say, if you run a business, if you love this show, if you are a part of a business, and you would love to partner with us in any way, shape, or form, we would love to have that conversation. So you can find us on Twitter at Will Badloos, at LDP Vikings, or you can comment in the show notes on YouTube. Find us on Facebook. You can probably find us there. Anyways, give us a shout. This was fun. We will be back. We've got 3 more shows, Jordan, before the draft, maybe 3+, depending on how spicy things get.
Yes.
We're going to keep diving into these things. There's right now there's 4 picks, but like Dustin said, there might be 7. So we got a lot to talk about, and we'll probably have Dustin back on at least one more time before draft starts in late April. Between now and then, this is Load the Box signing off. Skol y'all.